Sarah gripped the pitchfork, her hands raw and calloused from years of toil. She swung it with all her might, shoving the hay bales into the barn. Sweat soaked her brow, but there was no time to stop, no time for rest. The sun had begun to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the field. She hated this part of the day. It meant the teenagers from town would be walking by soon, their laughter and sneers louder than ever as they mocked her. She heard them before they appeared, their voices floating on the wind like an inevitable storm. "Look at Sarah, still playing farm girl." Rachel's voice was sharp, mocking. "She'll never amount to anything, just a joke." Sarah didn't look up. She kept working, but every word hit her like a punch to the gut, a familiar sting. The same sting she'd been enduring since childhood. "She must love the dirt." Another voice joined in. "Is that her whole world?" Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to yell, to throw the pitchfork. But she didn't. She never did. She simply focused on the task, letting the noise bounce off her like water off a stone. It was easier this way, wasn't it? But it hurt. Every single time. She'll never get out of here. A farm girl stuck in a dusty old town. Pitiful. Rachel continued, laughing with her friends. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them away. She had to keep going. Her grandmother was inside, sick. She couldn't afford to slow down. Her life had always been this way. Stuck, small, quiet. She dreamed of leaving this life, escaping the town that never saw her, never cared. But there was no way out. Not when you came from nothing. The only thing she had was the farm, her grandmother's stories, and the occasional dreams of something more. But dreams never paid the bills. As they walked away, Sarah exhaled sharply, trying to hold herself together. She hated them, but even more, she hated that they were right. Maybe she was destined to be nothing but a forgotten farm girl. The sound of an engine revving broke her from her thoughts. Sarah glanced up, startled. A sleek black car pulled up beside the barn, dust kicking up in the dry evening air. The driver, a man in a sharp suit, stepped out, adjusting his collar. He didn't look like he belonged here, and Sarah felt a small pang of unease as he approached. "Sarah Walker?" the man asked, his voice smooth and authoritative. "Yes," Sarah replied, unsure if she should be worried or confused. "I'm Richard Cole. I represent the Walker family estate. You've inherited a great fortune." Sarah froze. "What?" Richard's smile was patient but unbothered. "It's true. You are the heir to a legacy, properties, businesses, assets worth billions." Her mouth went dry. "What do you mean? Just a farm girl. I don't understand." Richard pulled out an envelope, handing it to her. "This is your inheritance. A lawyer will contact you soon with more details. But for now, you must know, this farm is just the beginning." Sarah stared at the envelope in disbelief. This wasn't real. How could it be? I don't have a legacy. I'm just Sarah." Richard raised an eyebrow. "You are Sarah Walker, and now you are the last of the Walkers. Your family was wealthy, hidden away from the world for reasons we will discuss later." She shook her head, holding onto the envelope as if it were made of glass, fragile and impossible to comprehend. I don't want this. I'm fine here." Richard's eyes softened, almost like he'd heard this before. "I understand, but whether you want it or not, you have it. You've inherited it, Sarah. And it's time you knew what you've been missing." The next day, Sarah sat in a cold, sterile office, papers scattered in front of her. Everything looked so official, too official for someone like her. The lawyer, Elizabeth, sat across from her, speaking in calm, measured tones. But Sarah's mind was still racing. The words billions, family fortune, and heiress echoed in her head, but they didn't fit her. They didn't belong with her. "Your family's wealth was hidden for many years, Sarah," Elizabeth was saying. "Your parents, well, they didn't want this life for you, but now it's yours. Your inheritance is vast. There are properties, investments, and assets waiting for you. You have a choice to make." "A choice?" Sarah echoed, her voice almost trembling. Yes, Elizabeth replied. You can accept the inheritance, take control of what's yours, and step into the life you were always meant to lead. Or you can walk away, return to this life. She gestured to the window, where Sarah could still see the barn in the distance. Why didn't they tell me? Sarah asked quietly. Why didn't they ever tell me about any of this? Elizabeth hesitated. Your family's history is complicated, Sarah. There are many reasons, but it's not for you to worry about now. What matters is the future. The words felt like a weight she couldn't carry. The future? She couldn't even handle the present. The following days were a blur. Sarah found herself in meetings, conference rooms, and phone calls with people she could hardly understand. There were numbers, properties, lawyers, and offers for her to sign. It was all so much, so fast. She had never seen money like this before. But as the wealth poured in, so did the pressure. Everyone wanted something from her. The distant relatives, the business partners, everyone except the people she had once called friends. People who had laughed at her for years now wanted in. They wanted her money, her attention, her influence. Sarah found herself questioning everything. Why had this happened to her? She wasn't special. She wasn't better than anyone else. Was she just some pawn in a game she didn't understand? That's when Lucas appeared. At first, she thought he was just another businessman, another figure trying to manipulate her. But there was something about him, a presence that made her feel small, almost like he could see through her. He came from a world much darker than the one Sarah had ever known. I didn't ask for any of this, Sarah said one evening, as Lucas sat across from her in her new mansion, staring at her with his cool, calculating eyes. Lucas smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You never do. But this world doesn't care about what you want, Sarah. It cares about what you can give. She shivered. She had always thought the farm had been a prison. But the more she lived in this new world, the more she realized she was still trapped. Trapped by expectations, by her family's wealth, and by the man sitting in front of her. Who are you really? Sarah asked, her voice shaking slightly. Lucas's gaze flickered. I am someone who knows what you need, he said cryptically. And you need power. The more Sarah got to know Lucas, the more she was pulled into his world. He wasn't just a businessman. He had connections, influence, and a dark side she didn't want to see. But she couldn't resist him. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her want to prove she belonged here. She began to change. The girl who once walked the dirt roads of her farm was no longer the same. She wore expensive clothes, attended galas, and made decisions that affected entire companies. But at night, when the lights went out, she still heard the laughter of those kids, mocking her. She still saw the farm in her mind, the place she had come from, the place she would never go back to. One night, Lucas leaned in close, his lips brushing against her ear. You can't go back to being who you were, Sarah. Not anymore. You belong to me now. Her heart pounded, but it wasn't fear. It was something else. I'm not a farm girl anymore. But the price was steep. The more Sarah embraced the power, the more she lost herself. She didn't know who she was anymore. Was she Sarah Walker, the girl who had once dreamed of a simple life? Or was she now just a pawn in Lucas's game? She needed to make a choice. She needed to find herself again before it was too late. As the days passed, Sarah's transformation became undeniable. The quiet, hard-working farm girl who had once been mocked and overlooked had now become a woman of power and influence. She attended high-profile events, signed multi-million-dollar deals, and commanded respect in boardrooms. But with every decision she made, the distance between who she once was and who she was becoming grew ever wider. Lucas, always by her side, was both a mentor and a manipulator. He had shown her the world of wealth and influence, and though she felt drawn to him, she began to realize that the more she immersed herself in his world, the more she lost herself. He wanted her to embrace the power she had inherited, to become the ruthless businesswoman he knew she could be, but at what cost? One evening, as Sarah stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling window in her penthouse, overlooking the sprawling city, she felt a sudden emptiness. The skyline, the lights, the money, it all felt hollow. She had everything she could have dreamed of, yet nothing felt right. The laughter of the kids who had mocked her echoed in her mind. Was this really who she was now? Was this the life she had been born to lead? Lucas entered the room quietly, his presence both comforting and suffocating. "You're a part of this world now, Sarah," he said, his voice low and commanding. "You belong to me, to this empire. The farm girl is gone, and the woman standing in front of me is someone who can take over this city." Sarah turned to face him, her heart heavy with confusion. "But what about who I was?" she whispered. "What happened to the girl who just wanted peace? The one who dreamed of helping others?" Lucas' eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of something. Perhaps regret, or maybe something darker. "That girl never existed," he said bluntly. "She was just a fantasy. What you have now is real." But Sarah wasn't so sure anymore. The world Lucas had shown her, with all its luxury and promises of power, felt like a cage she had willingly stepped into. She had the choice to continue down this path or to break free from it. As Lucas turned to leave, his hand brushing the doorframe, Sarah made a decision. She wasn't going to let him define her. She wasn't going to let the wealth, the power, or the control take away who she truly was. She walked over to the desk where the papers were scattered, evidence of all the deals she had signed, and pushed them aside. "No," she said aloud, her voice firm. "This isn't who I am." In that moment, Sarah realized that the wealth her family had hidden, the empire she had inherited, didn't define her. It was what she chose to do with it that would matter. She wasn't a puppet to be controlled by Lucas or anyone else. She was Sarah Walker, and she could forge her own path. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of phone calls and meetings, but Sarah knew what she had to do. She sold off most of the businesses she had inherited, donating much of the proceeds to charity organizations that supported rural communities. She made sure her grandmother's farm was preserved, turning it into a foundation for agricultural innovation, helping young farmers and empowering them to grow in ways she never had the chance to. Lucas tried to stop her, using his influence to pressure her into staying in the game. But Sarah was resolute. She had learned enough to know that true power wasn't about owning everything. It was about doing the right thing. She confronted Lucas one last time, her gaze unwavering. "You thought I would become like you," she said, her voice steady. "But I won't. I'm not interested in power for the sake of power. I want to make a difference. I want to help people." Lucas' face hardened. "You'll regret this. You're walking away from everything." Sarah shook her head. "No, I'm walking towards who I'm meant to be." As she left the high-rise building, stepping out into the crisp evening air, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in months, she felt free. She wasn't running away from her inheritance. She was embracing her choice to live on her own terms. The farm, the legacy, and the power were all still part of her story, but they no longer controlled her. She wasn't just a farm girl, nor was she a billionaire heiress. She was Sarah Walker, a woman who had found her own path, and that was worth more than anything money could buy. If you loved Sarah's story and want more gripping tales of transformation and self-discovery, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on this video. We want to hear from you. What would you have done in Sarah's shoes? Share your thoughts below.